everyone, and welcome to Advanced IT Operations with Device42 and Excalibur Data Systems. My name is Tabitha Ishman, and I'm the Marketing Manager of Excalibur Data Systems. And I just wanted to welcome all of you to our webinar today. And then we're going to go ahead and talk about a few logistics before we get started. So the lines have been muted, and the webinar is being recorded. So the recording will be sent via email to all the participants tomorrow, and we'll answer questions at the end in a Q&A session, but you can ask questions anytime during the presentation just by typing them into the Q&A or chat section. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. So there's a nice photo of me up there. And as I said, I am the marketing manager. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Excalibur Data Systems before I do hand it over. So we are a boutique integrator of ITSM and enterprise service management solutions. We were founded in 1998 and have been evolving and growing our services ever since. We have two headquarters, one in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and then the other in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada. And we have long-term strategic partners that we work with to achieve the best outcome for our customers' needs. That's why we're really excited today to be collaborating with Device42. And if you're interested in reading any more about our partnerships, just go ahead and visit our website. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce Damian Roskill, VP of Marketing from Device42.
Hey, thanks for that, Tabitha. Really appreciate, and as usual, we really appreciate you inviting us to be on for your customers and related entities. My name is Damian Roskill. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Device42. I'm also joined today by David Lasecki, who's on our solution architecture team. David works with some of our biggest clients, and he'll be driving the demo towards the end of this presentation after we get through some brief slideware. So David's just a great person to have on the air to discuss. If you've got like deep technical questions, David's the one to ask them. I want to just spend a little bit of time just setting context, and I promise I'll keep this brief. So I just want to talk a little bit about the macro issue that our customers talk to us about all the time, which is increasing IT complexity. Now, I don't think anybody out there or anybody on the line is unaware of how IT is increasing in complexity, but I do think what's interesting and what our customers tell us is what's changing is what's driving that complexity. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of those issues. So I'm going to talk about it in terms of a factor, like what is it that's causing that, and then what's the outcome from that? What's going to be, or what's a likely outcome from having that issue? So the first one I want to talk about is this drive for innovation without additional resources. So I don't know about your organization, but we see digital transformations being very commonplace, but that there's often a surprising lack of budget on the other side that is allocated to support the IT staff and IT work in general to support that provisioning. And so on the one hand, you've got this drive for innovation, and on the other hand, you've got the resource constraints of a traditional IT department. And that may cause your organization to view IT as a blocker, right? So they might say, I don't understand why they're not supporting this great innovation effort, despite the fact that they don't understand all the stuff that you were supporting beforehand. And now this is additional work. So but it is that relentless drive for innovation that really is driving complexity as well, right? Because you've got additional technologies and additional asks coming in. Second thing, and we see this all the time, is silos that exist where one team owns applications and another owns infrastructure. The common phrase that we hear from the IT groups on this is that applications are sometimes just thrown over the wall to them, and that they don't come with appropriate resources or run books or really much information to talk about how they're supposed to be supported. And what that leads to is difficulty in troubleshooting those applications when there's an outage. So when there's the outage, if you don't really understand the application, how it communicates with across the different systems, the different dependencies, that can lead to challenges. Certainly, we all have new security and compliance requirements coming on us all the time. Maybe you operate in a highly regulated industry like healthcare or government or finance, in which case those regulations just come fast and furious. But even in fairly non-regulated environments, you may be facing new compliance requirements. It might be something as simple as a regular audit of all the hardware and software that you have in your organization. So regardless of that, this leads to a huge amount of time being spent on manual auditing processes. And that could be for something like hardware warranties, end of life, hardware. You can't have, maybe you have a requirement that your particular applications can't run on end of life hardware. Well, you need to know about that in advance, number one. And number two, from a complexity standpoint, that's an enormous, as your complexity goes up, your manual effort gets much larger as well. Third one is federated IT teams, and a lot of people don't know what I mean when I say this. So what I mean is that you have different groups working on your IT infrastructure that are not necessarily connected. So that could be something like an IT team and a DevOps team, where the DevOps team is mainly running the cloud. That could be a geographic disbursement of your team. So maybe you've got data centers in multiple countries, and each one of those has a separate team which is making changes to that infrastructure to support whatever their local needs are. But the outcome of that is that it really becomes impossible to know what the current state of your IT estate is at any given point in time. Certainly cloud, multi-cloud, in addition to data center, is creating challenges for IT. We often say that, when we walk in, the most common tool that we find and use for doing asset management is Excel or Visio. But for more sophisticated organizations, maybe they've deployed some tools for doing automatic discovery, but then now that they've added cloud, now they're using those cloud consoles, their web consoles, to monitor and manage those individual clouds. So maybe you've got one for Google Cloud, maybe you've got one for AWS, maybe you've got one for Azure. And the end result, we actually saw this with one customer, was that they ended up back in Excel anyway, because they had to take all of that information and pull it back in with the information that was being brought from their own internal data center. So again, the outcome here is just an incomplete view of your infrastructure. And then finally, you've got standalone events like COVID. And the first thing that happened with COVID was obviously everybody's working from home, and we want to make sure that we've got good VPN infrastructure up and running so that everybody can access the applications. But then COVID has now exposed cases where that application just wasn't meant to scale outside of the dedicated connections that existed inside the organization. And so that's creating new application performance issues. Maybe they're location-based, maybe they're just in general. And that's creating new complexity, because maybe you're being asked now to move that application rather rapidly out to the cloud. So the big missing component in all of these complexity adds is the same. It's visibility. One of our customers told me, and I love this, that visibility is like magic pixie dust. When you have it, you just feel much more confident about any decision you're going to make. And by having that visibility, you gain three things. You gain clarity, you understand what you have. You gain confidence, you understand how it all works and connects together. And finally, you gain ultimately control. And this is particularly powerful in organizations where we've seen IT professionals just feel like they can't really get their arms around the organization because there's just so much change happening all the time. And so, this is really the problem that Device42 was created to solve. So I'll keep it simple. Device42, we're a discovery tool, an asset management tool for hybrid IT. So for data center, for cloud, and for hybrid, meaning across data center and cloud. In terms of what we think, what we like to focus on in terms of creating a great experience for you as an IT professional, it's really on making it so that it's easy to get up and running quickly, and easy to manage. So it doesn't require a lot of management from you. So we really want to make it that your time to value as short as possible. You can be up and running with Device42 sometimes in hours, and but usually in just a few days you'll have a complete view of your IT estate. These are some of the common use cases for Device42. What's great about our solution is that the same data that you use in any one of these use cases can be used to support the other ones. So customers usually come to us with a specific problem they want to solve. Maybe they've come to us and they want to do a cloud migration, or maybe they're doing an IT automation and agility initiative inside their organization. Or maybe they're just looking for a platform to enable collaborative troubleshooting across the different silos of infrastructure and application. But regardless, that same data can be used to power any of the other initiatives and use cases that you've got there. So once you've got it in place, you can really get a lot of value out of it. In terms of how we do this, it's pretty simple. We keep it to kind of 3 simple steps: discover, map, and integrate or syndicate. So discover, first, we discover everything in your organization, in your estate. I'll talk more about that. Next, we automatically build application dependencies so that you can understand how your applications are communicating with each other. And then finally, we know that this data is most powerful when it's used not just in Device42, but outside of Device42 to drive other tools in your IT stack. And we integrate with most of the common ones you're probably already using. People always ask, how do we deploy? How does this get started? So it's a really simple deployment. We deploy as a pre-configured appliance on most common hypervisors. We're agentless by design, so you don't need to install agents on all of your infrastructure in order to get Device42 up and running. It's really just a matter of entering credentials in for your different systems. But in terms of that credentialing, we really focus on lowest privilege credentialing. So we want to make sure that we're not requiring super admin accounts in order to gain access to the information that we want to pull from your infrastructure. We also focus on just having a minimal impact on your environment. We don't want to be sucking down lots of network resources, pulling data constantly. This data resides on-prem. So because we deploy on-prem, that means that the data remains in your control so that you can decide how and where you want to use it. And we don't use any call home or internet access. There is one exception to that, which is for the cloud recommendation engine, which does go outside your organization just to pull back recommendations for pricing on different cloud providers. But we're not sending that data to them. We're simply going and getting the latest pricing information. These are some of the protocols that we use to discover the infrastructure. And you know, we can go into each of the technical details of them, but I think what's important for you as an end user to understand is that you don't have to worry about it. All of this is abstracted away from you, and inside the interface, you're really just setting up discovery jobs that then go out and automatically grab that data and then present it to you in a consistent fashion, regardless of the way it was discovered. This is what we're really known for. So there are other discovery tools out there on the market that do what we call the easy stuff. That's your Windows and Linux servers, usually you know, more recent ones, more recent versions. But we like to say we cover from the oldest to the newest. So from OpenVMS to Kubernetes and Docker, and everything in between. So that includes all your cloud, bare metal, all the data center assets and network assets, all of that gets discovered. And in addition to that, we just recently announced that we acquired a company that focused on storage discovery. And so now we're going to be incorporating storage discovery and usage information into the tool as well. And this is going to bring us information from across over 20 different storage vendors. So if you've got storage, it's one of the big black holes of IT spend. The answer to which, you know, when you have a storage problem is, let's go buy, oh, well, we can't really understand it. Let's go buy more storage. Well, now you can get some answers to that and find out how that storage is being leveraged and how you can optimize it. In terms of individual components that live inside, inside Device42, the first thing is that we offer out of the box data center management and CMDB. So all the classic DSIM tools, room and rack layouts, patch panels, power monitoring, all of that comes in the core, along with a pre-configured CMDB. Now, maybe you've used a CMDB in the past that wasn't pre-configured and required a lot of manual setup and intervention. Ours comes pre-configured and it's connected to that automatic discovery so that once you set it up, you are pre-populating all of that data right into the CMDB. And so that makes it super fast to get your CMDB up and running, and it overcomes the traditional objection or problem with CMDBs, which is that they become outdated really, really quickly. Next thing that we can offer is software license management. So we can go out and look at all the software that's installed in your estate, including installed packages, patches, versions. We can detect prohibited software. We can check expiration dates. We can give notifications on when your warranties are about to come up. All of that kind of stuff can be done. And we can do that through customizable notifications. Next up is application dependency mapping. So I talked about this at the top, which is this idea of building maps automatically of your applications. So what we'll do is we'll go out and we'll actually look at the information that's flowing between your different applications and then construct maps of those applications and that infrastructure and how that all connects. We also offer an additional functionality called business apps, which you can think of as kind of like Visio on top of that. So suck in the automated picture of your application dependencies, and then you can bring that that wisdom that you bring as somebody that's been in the organization to that sort of tribal knowledge to bear and say, well, this doesn't really connect to this system despite what the automatic system discovered. And here are some things additionally that we talk that are important. Maybe we've got some manual processes we want to map into that as well. But it's an extremely powerful tool for just mapping and understanding your applications. And the way you'd use this is obviously you can use this for cloud migrations, right? Because if you want to migrate an app, you better understand all the dependencies before you move it, or else you're going to have some pain when you get to the other side and it doesn't work because you didn't know that it was dependent on a certain application. Or maybe you're moving to, say, a new secure micro-segmented network, just as another example. And if you're going to do that, you better understand all the IP addresses and communication pathways that application is traveling over. And then the third use case is obviously troubleshooting, right? When an application goes down, being able to see all what is impacted and quickly assess what the impacts are for your users is incredibly important. And then this last component I'm going to talk about, it's our resource utilization and cloud recommendation engine. So we go out and poll your infrastructure and understand what its current utilization is. And you can obviously use that for optimizing your current infrastructure. But the other great use case for it is for cloud migration, where we can take that data and use it to actually power cloud recommendations across all the different clouds. So using Device42, if you want to move an application, you can find out, what is the right sizing for AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, just as a simple example. Or maybe you want to go back and look at your current usage and then see if you need to right size it. So those two components work really well together, but the resource utilization can obviously be used standalone just on your data center. And then I talked about this, integrations are super important. We know that you're using a huge array of tools in your stack, and no app is an island anymore. And so we integrate with a wide variety of tools across the spectrum. That's, including management tools, ticketing systems like Jira, BMC, Sharewell, Freshservice, but also automation tools like Ansible, Chef, StackStorm. And then on the migration side, we've got integrations with most of the major providers there. And then cloud is interesting because we're both reading from cloud, meaning we're going out and discovering cloud, but we're also pushing back to cloud in terms of migration. So I just want to talk for a second about just a case study. So like how somebody actually uses us. So, This is a financial services company. They had over 5,000 workloads across 5 data centers and multiple clouds, and they were migrating some of those applications as part of a larger digital transformation effort. And they were tracking assets as we typically see it, which is they got spreadsheets, they got Visio, and they've got it all mapped out. And they were getting frustrated because they kept having issues with outages, with the information being wrong. When they got that ticket in the middle of the night, they couldn't see what was happening. They were doing manual server provisioning, and then they had the separate tickets. So IT was using one set of tools to track the infrastructure. Ticketing was completely separate set of tools, and the two weren't connected. And so afterwards, what they came away with was what I call an always audit ready organization. So a complete picture of the IT estate. They saw much faster issue resolution. They cut it in half. And that was by integrating the data from Device42 into their ITSM tool and getting that full application dependency view inside their ITSM stack. And then they also rolled out automated provisioning with Ansible. So using Ansible to drive in combination with Device42 to automatically provision servers, and doing that both inside the data center and also in the cloud. And then finally accelerating some of these cloud migrations. So using that business app functionality that I talked about, using that to create to set up move groups for key applications. And that in turn lowered the risk of application failure post-migration because they really understood all these applications and knew that they were going to work once they got to the other side. Whew. So I've been talking for a little while here. This is our website. Feel free to go there and download a trial. We encourage everybody to download a trial and try it out for themselves, get the experience. If you do have questions after this, that's my email address. Email me. I love to hear from people. I may not know the answer, but I'll get you to the person that does. We love to hear from customers. One of the things we're known for is our unbelievable support. And we believe in that both on a pre-sales and post-sales status. So download a trial and try and get it up and running. And if you have any trouble, just reach out to us. And so with great apologies to the Beastie Boys, I'm gonna shift over to David for doing our demo. And rather than doing a sort of typical demo where we just walk through each of the features, we're gonna do it as a little bit of a story. And these are some of the areas that he's gonna touch on. So things like root cause analysis, how you get visibility into your applications, as well as like some sort of ordinary nitty-gritty day-to-day management tasks, like finding the servers that no longer matter, that you should shut down or consolidate, or seeing which contracts are coming up for renewal, or how you get to a software audit in one click. And then some more advanced stuff like cloud sizing and optimization, like how do I know what size my application, what I need in the cloud to support that application. So with that, I'm going to say, David, are you there?
I am here.
All right, I'm going to make you presenter.
Okie dokie.
All right, and I'll be hanging on, and we'll take questions at the end if you got questions. And David, over to you.
Great. Should be able to see my screen. According to the audience view, it looks like it. Okay, good. Thank you. So before we dive into Device42, I wanted to take it over from a role as if I were to look at this from a system administrator standpoint. So you probably get a ticket in. Hopefully you're not just using email, but one of the integrations we have is with Jira. We also have integrations with Zendesk, and we also have integrations with Freshworks. So when a user puts in a ticket into one of those systems, we have an integration with the CIs in the back end that you can actually link the assets to the tickets and vice versa, if you will, to then view them inside of Device42 and or come into the ticketing system from Device42. So I have a ticket here for a Jupyter app, a web application. It's unable to query and post content, so we have a pretty standard ticket. Web page is displaying a backend connections not found. Obviously, with that, I'm not sure exactly what could be going on, but we know something's going on. From the ticket itself, I can then look at the view linked assets. For some of the other integrations, more specifically on the Freshworks side, we can also bring in the relationship maps so we can start looking at those directly. But either way, we're going to go directly into Device42, start looking at the asset itself. We have some linked assets here. It's connected to Switch 2. I've linked myself to it, as well as Chris is the one who actually put in the ticket, so he linked himself to the asset. I'm actually going to look at this actual S1 MySQL device. Yeah, I think my browser might have timed out, so let me do this one more time. Sorry about that. View the linked asset. Of course, I clicked on myself. Sorry about that. And then I can go and view in Device42. So when I come and look at the asset inside of Device42, I'll be brought right back into the CI record for this device. So I'm looking at the name, virtual subtype, serial number information, any of the properties information. I'm also brought directly to this applications page. So this applications page will show me any of the business applications, not to be confused with installed software or installed, we'll say installed applications or software. That actually resides inside of the software tab here. But these applications are linked to what does the server communicate to that actually affects any of the actual applications. So if we actually just click on the Jupyter application here, what we'll see is kind of we'll say the Visio diagram, if you will, of the layout of the server communication. So this is made by our business applications itself. We're actually pulling in the data from our application dependency maps. So we go into essentially Draw.io canvas. We can take the information that's displayed from these application dependency views and then put them into a business application and make it look pretty. So this is something we typically give a business owner and saying, hey, this is actually what your application's made of. This is kind of where it stands, and this is how we see it. So we can also marry this up in real time. Right now we have it's pretty standard 3-tier app here. We have a database, middleware, some of the client web entries. We have a QA environment as well. So if I wanted to see what this looks like real time, I can actually go back into and look at the affinity groups themselves. So if I go to apps, affinity groups, I'll just bring this up in a new page here. I'm actually going to look for MySQL. I'm going to look at this impact chart. So an impact chart is going to show us all the communication that is talking within this app for this specific service. A dependency chart is just a subset of a impact chart, rather. It allows us to see just that specific dependency back to whether it be MySQL or Tomcat. So this impact chart is going to show me all of the communication that I care about per Jupyter coming back to the database. For anything from like just Apache back to a database, we'll see more of this type of communication, right, from a dependency standpoint. Now, this looks a little different than my affinity group view, my business app view. I need more coffee this afternoon. So I see I have S2 Tomcat, I have my MySQL box, I have Apache. I also see that I have a couple other machines that are associated here, so I can probably go query the organization, say, hey, I see these machines that are now connected to this MySQL box. Did anyone authorize these changes? Was this something that was added in? I can even get a little bit deeper into this. So this is just a global view, just showing me all the machines from a CI to CI perspective connecting. I can actually look at these relationships by just clicking on the arrow. So when I look at this arrow, I'm seeing the service to communication. So right here we have D42 SP SIM service talking back to Java on this machine. And we also have, I think, the same service talking back here. So I can go back out and say, hey, someone set up a Java app or an applet, or did someone do some testing and just leave it running? We see this here, we can see it live time. And great thing about application dependency mapping or affinity groups is we'll run these essentially daily, or we can go into the settings and say, hey, go run me a map now based on the intervals we've had. But I can go back in time and see, well, when was this actually added? What was the changes? And I can even go all the way back to the beginning and say, this is what it really looked like in the beginning, obviously a lot less complex. So we have that ability to go back in time, take a look at these kind of snapshots of, well, what communication added where, and kind of pinpoint what could be the issue. When we start looking at information around servers and is this a zombie server? Is this actually being utilized efficiently? That's where we start talking about trends data or resource utilization. So those resource utilization data is brought in from a periodic job that we've set up on a Autodiscovery job. It can go all the way down to 15 seconds. Typically, we'll do it anywhere from 5, 10, 15 minutes, obviously depending on what we're trying to capture. But that trends data looks something similar to this. It will give us a kind of a map for, at this point, I'm just looking at one server, but it'll give me the latest values from the last time it was discovered, the CPU metrics, memory metrics, any of the disk IOPS, IO rates, latencies, transfers, anything that's currently being used. We could take this data, it's saved in the database. So all those data points eventually add up. When we go into do a cloud recommendation, this is great to see just from one server, but we take all those data points for anything that's resource utilization, and we can select maybe just Linux or maybe just Windows, or say for the example, the Jupyter application. I could take that application and say, I want to run it through the cloud recommendation engine. Our cloud recommendation engine would then go in and say, okay, I have all these data points. Let's select the cloud I would like to move it to, the region that I potentially want to move into, maybe give it a safety factor, knowing for growth, and then let me select the actual images and run it and see, okay, well, what do I have? What could I be using? This will actually print out a report once I hit send to cloud and analyze data. This is where Damien said way back in the beginning of the presentation that this is a caveat to the internet question. Our system doesn't use internet except to query these APIs. We'll get a file that looks similar to this. And this file is going to tell us a couple of different things. We'll have down here at the bottom, we'll have a couple tabs based on the vendor. We'll have regular recommendations. A regular recommendation is going to show you the CI itself. So anything that we've actually discovered. So if it's 2 CPUs, 4 gigs RAM discovered, that's what we're going to give you back. If it's 4 CPUs, 16 gigs of discovered, that is the instance size we're going to give you back. The RU data recommendations are going to be based on those metrics that I was just showing. So these metrics will be a little bit more realistic to over the points and times we've collected this information. This is what we would suggest based on these discovered data points. As you can see here, I'll stop right here. We have a monthly on-demand cost. We also do the 1 year reserved all upfront prorated. And again, this is around all of the usage data that we've collected over resource utilization compared to regular metrics or the regular CI discovery. The other thing we can do to also get this data is we can pull this out either using API, webhooks. We also have an OBDC connection. So we can share this out, if you will. We have Power BI for OBDC connections. So you can look at specific things for zombie servers of this CPU utilization, memory utilization, disk utilization, maybe specific application. You can also look at services. So anything from the services aspect that I was also just talking about, we can also do that as well. Any of these reports we can actually share out with you. So they're just a standard Power BI statistics or reports, sorry. And this is also very helpful to help sort, filter specific relationships that you're looking for. You can look for anything underutilized, and or overutilized. And basically any connections that we can actually see. We can see it right from here. Inside of Device42, there's also a software license manager, and that allows us to look at contracts and information around software that's installed on the actual machines themselves. So that falls under software components. So for example, if I want to look for MySQL or Oracle, I can look at the specific product itself. I can look at, for example, I'll just click on MySQL, the discovery count, the application name, where it's actually installed, and its software use. For something that you have a license key for, we'll actually add that license key into the software component itself. So as we run discovery, we'll increment that discovery count based on finding that license key and also the license model. So the license model is just essentially the terms of service. So if you have an Oracle database and it's supposed to be for a half CPU core hit, and we have a 6-core machine, we'll increment the license count based on the specific cores at a half CPU core hit for that Oracle database. Other things that we can do is looking at integrations with SaltStack, Chef, Puppet, Ansible. All of those integrations allow us to essentially make playbooks and get configuration data in and out of the system. So that's really, really helpful in configuration. If I wanted to find, for example, just things for Java, I can look for just Java inside of the system. I can then use this to create a specific playbook and say, okay, I have Java 1.8 here. Let me print out all the systems that I have Java 1.8, or maybe I have an older version of Java and it shows up as Java 1.6. Let me create a playbook and say, let's go update all these Java versions to 1.8, or any specific machine with a specific software set. Let me go and update those. Other uses for Device42, besides our APIs, is webhooks. So we can also use webhooks, typically HTTP webhooks, for automation. I'm going to hand it back over for questions.
Thanks for that, David. Really appreciate it. We do have a few questions coming in, so let me just take a second here. While I do that, I'm not sure if I can make myself presenter. Oh, there you go. You're making me presenter. I appreciate that. Okay, so hopefully you can see that again. I just wanted to put this back up to give people my email address again. If anybody wants to write me an additional question after this, maybe it comes to you after you leave the meeting. So let me start with some of these questions. Okay, so the first question, David, is what permissions are needed for Device42 to work?
Sure. So for discovery, Device42 is typically going to use a service account for that auto discovery, typically read only. For Windows specifically, it needs to be part of the DCOM users and performance user groups, as well as a couple namespaces that need to be used in WMI. And we have all that documented in docs.device42.com. And for anything elevated permissions, we have a sheet that we can send you for any of the Linux, Unix, Windows commands that are used for elevation.
This is a pretty simple one. I think I can answer it, which is, do you integrate with Sharewell's ITSM stack?
Yes.
And the answer is yes. Yes, we do. Integrate very well with them. You talked a little bit about, David, I know you talked a little bit about, setting up discovery jobs, but the question here is, how often do you recommend running discovery? And are jobs incremental or do they run over and over again?
Sure. So for an auto discovery job itself, we typically do that like a full stack scan, if you will. I'll put those in air quotes, once a day. Typically, the whole infrastructure is not going to change. The first scan might take a little longer than subsequent scans, so I'll consider them subsequent scans as incremental, even though we're still doing a full stack scan, unless something drastically changes in the infrastructure. For application dependency mapping and resource utilization, again, that's going to be more focused on what we're trying to find, but the limits of those are for application dependency mapping, we can go down to 5 minutes, and typically we'll start somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour. And then for resource utilizations, you can go all the way down to 15 seconds. Again, we'll typically start somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes, depending on what we're trying to actually find.
That's great. So here's the question is, how would I use Device42 for deciding how to merge applications onto a single hypervisor? It's pretty general. I don't know if you can provide any guidelines.
Yeah, and actually this question comes up actually a lot. So a lot of this is going to be around extrapolating the data that Device42 has discovered. For putting or merging a application together, we don't do that. We don't have any magic sauce or that magic pixie dust as of yet. It is a common question. I know we're all thinking of ways to try to use AI and frequencies of AIs to suggest that, but for right now, it would be extrapolating the data of the two systems that you have, and then looking at what you could potentially merge, but that would be outside of Device42.
And then this looks like the last question, which is, how does Device42 gather actual utilization data?
Ask that question one more time.
How does Device42 gather the actual utilization data?
We're utilizing specific sysctl commands. So we're just basically using the operating system commands within either WMI or Linux to get the essentially, I'll call them task manager statistics.
All right, that's it. Tabitha, that looks like all the questions. So I'm going to pass it back to you. And once again, thanks very much for having us on.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and close it out. So thank you everyone that was able to join us today, and you can look for the recording in your inbox tomorrow, and then it also will be made available on Excalibur's YouTube channel. So thank you, Damien and David, for your time today, and we will talk next time.